Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what is unfolding right now in the Horn of Africa demands directness. Everyone is focused on Taiwan. Everyone is watching the South China Sea. Every analyst, every pundit, every television network is asking the same question. Will there be war in the Pacific? But that is not the real story. What we are witnessing is not a confrontation over Taiwan. It is not about trade routes in the Malacca Strait. There's artinstinct or participants. What we are witnessing is the quiet construction of the most strategically significant military infrastructure China has built in the last decade. And it is not in Asia. It is in Africa, specifically in Djibouti. I am sitting here looking at satellite imagery that has been circulating among defense analysts for the past 96 hours. And I need you to look at it with me, metaphorically speaking, because what it shows is not an aircraft carrier. It is not a missile battery. It is not a hypersonic weapon system or a naval destroyer. What it shows is something far more significant. A completed deep water port facility with reinforced pier infrastructure capable of servicing nuclear submarines, connected directly to what multiple intelligence sources now confirm is China's expanded military base, covering an area that has grown from 80 hectares to over 240 hectares in just 18 months. And most Americans, most Europeans, most people watching the news cycle have absolutely no idea this is happening. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this facility represents the single most important shift in global naval power projection since the Cold War, why it changes the entire calculus of American military dominance in 3 separate theaters simultaneously, and why what happens in Djibouti over the next 6 months will determine whether the United States can maintain its commitment to protect international shipping lanes. This is the kind of analysis you simply will not find on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively war-gamed by American military strategists right now, today, April the 18th, 2026. Let's start with geography, because geography is destiny in military strategy, and Djibouti's geography is perhaps the most strategically valuable real estate on the African continent. The country sits at the southern entrance to the Red Sea, directly controlling access to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. That strait, for those unfamiliar, is 14 miles wide at its narrowest point. To put that in perspective, that is narrower than the distance between Manhattan and JFK Airport. Every single day, approximately 30,000 ships pass through or near this choke point, carrying roughly 10% of global seaborne trade and nearly 30% of all container traffic moving between Asia and Europe. When cargo leaves Shanghai bound for Rotterdam, it goes through the Bab el-Mandeb. When oil tankers leave the Persian Gulf bound for European refineries, they go through the Bab el-Mandeb. When military vessels from the United States 6th Fleet need to reinforce operations in the Persian Gulf or respond to crises in East Africa, they go through the Bab el-Mandeb. The U.S. Energy Information Administration has calculated that approximately 6.2 million barrels of crude oil and refined petroleum products pass through this strait every single day. This makes it the 4th most important maritime choke point in the world, after the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Malacca, and the Suez Canal. According to analysis published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies and confirmed by multiple naval experts, whoever controls Djibouti effectively controls the on-off switch for the entire Red Sea trade route. China understood this in 2008. They started moving in 2017, and they have been building ever since. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now, let's talk about what China actually built, because the scale of this infrastructure project has been systematically underreported in Western media, and the implications have been almost entirely missed. Announcement number 1, the port facility. And this one matters more than anything else happening in the Horn of Africa right now. What China has constructed is not a standard commercial port. According to reporting by Jane's Defense Weekly and confirmed by satellite analysis from the European Space Agency, China has built a port with pier reinforcement specifications that match almost exactly the submarine support facilities at their Yulin Naval Base on Hainan Island. The pier depth has been dredged to 45 meters. That number matters. American Los Angeles-class submarines have a maximum operating depth requirement of approximately 30 meters for safe docking. Chinese Type 093 nuclear attack submarines require 40 to 45 meters. The engineering specifications are not ambiguous. The port includes specialized cranes with weight capacities exceeding 400 tons, which is consistent with equipment needed to service nuclear propulsion systems. It includes climate-controlled warehouse facilities covering over 60,000 square meters, which defense analysts believe are designed to store precision munitions and sensitive electronic equipment that cannot withstand the extreme heat of the Djibouti and most significantly, the port includes a dedicated fuel storage facility with capacity estimated at over 300,000 cubic meters, which is roughly equivalent to the fuel storage capacity at the United States Naval Support Activity in Bahrain, which supports the entire Fifth Fleet. Commander Sarah Chen, a retired U.S. Navy logistics officer who has analyzed the satellite imagery, stated in a recent interview with Defense News, and I am quoting her directly here, the infrastructure we are seeing in Djibouti is not designed to support occasional port calls. It is designed to support sustained naval operations far from home ports. This is a forward operating base in everything but name. China currently operates 6 Type 093 attack submarines and 4 Type 094 ballistic missile submarines. That number matters because with refueling and resupply capability in Djibouti, those submarines can now patrol the Western Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean without returning to Chinese ports. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the military base expansion. This is the part the Pentagon has publicly acknowledged, though they have been remarkably quiet about the implications. In December of 2025, satellite imagery confirmed that China had expanded its official military base from its original 80 hectares to over 240 hectares, making it larger than the adjacent United States Camp Lemonnier, which has served as America's primary military facility in Africa since 2001. And there are according to reporting by Reuters and analyzed by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the expanded Chinese facility now includes underground bunker complexes with reinforced concrete construction consistent with ammunition storage or command and control centers designed to survive aerial bombardment. It includes a helicopter landing zone capable of supporting heavy lift aircraft, including the Chinese Z-20 transport helicopter. Most significantly, it includes what imagery analysts have identified as a signals intelligence facility with antenna arrays positioned to monitor communications traffic across East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Western Indian Ocean. Stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the regional implications become impossible to ignore. The expanded base sits less than 5 miles from Camp Lemonnier. That proximity is not accidental. According to multiple reports from U.S. military personnel stationed in Djibouti and confirmed by Defense Security Asia, Chinese surveillance equipment can monitor virtually all American military air traffic, communications, and troop movements in the region. When American Special Operations forces deploy from Lemonnier to conduct counterterrorism operations in Somalia or Yemen, Chinese intelligence officers know about it. When American reconnaissance aircraft take off to monitor Iranian activities in the Gulf of Aden, Chinese radar tracks them. The intelligence value of this proximity cannot be overstated. But the expansion serves another purpose that is even more significant from a strategic perspective. China now has the physical infrastructure to deploy and support a rapid reaction force of approximately 10,000 personnel in a crisis scenario. To put that in context, the United States currently maintains approximately 4,000 personnel at Camp Lemonnier. In any hypothetical conflict scenario involving control of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, China could achieve local military superiority within 72 hours of a decision to deploy. Received. That is announcement number 2. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. The economic leverage China has systematically constructed in Djibouti over the past 8 years. This is not just about military infrastructure. It is about debt, dependency, and political control that makes the entire strategic picture possible. According to analysis by the China-Africa Research Initiative at Johns Hopkins University and confirmed by International Monetary Fund data, China holds approximately 73% of Djibouti's total external debt. That percentage represents over $1.4 billion in loans in a country with a GDP of approximately $3.6 billion. Think carefully about what that ratio means. Djibouti's entire annual government revenue is approximately $600 million. The country is spending nearly 40% of that revenue just servicing Chinese debt. In 2023, when Djibouti struggled to make debt payments, China did not demand immediate repayment. Instead, according to reporting by the Financial Times, China restructured the loans and simultaneously negotiated a 99-year lease extension on the port facility and expanded access rights for military operations. This is economic statecraft at its most effective. China has not seized assets. It has not threatened military action. It has simply made Djibouti's government so financially dependent that saying no to Chinese requests is economically impossible. President Ismail Omar Guelleh, who has ruled Djibouti since 1999, has described China as Djibouti's most important strategic partner. When the United States raised concerns about the military base expansion in late 2025, Guelleh's government issued a diplomatic response saying that Djibouti maintains good relations with all partners and that the Chinese presence is purely commercial and defensive in nature. The Djiboutian government simultaneously announced a new $500 million infrastructure agreement with China to upgrade the country's electrical grid. The message was clear. American concerns are noted, but will not change policy. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is covering only one of them. The story you are hearing is about great power competition, about China's Belt and Road Initiative, about infrastructure development in Africa. That story is true, but it is incomplete. The story you are not hearing is about the systematic dismantling of American military primacy in a region the United States has controlled since the end of World War II. For the past 75 years, American naval power has rested on one foundational assumption: that the United States can project power anywhere in the world because it controls the critical maritime choke points. The Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Malacca, and the Bab el-Mandeb. American carrier strike groups can reach any ocean, any coastline, any crisis point because these passages remain open to American vessels and contested for adversaries. That assumption is now obsolete in the Horn of Africa. China has not closed the Bab el-Mandeb to American shipping. They have not needed to. What they have done is far more sophisticated. They have created the infrastructure to make closure possible while simultaneously making themselves indispensable to regional stability. When Houthi rebels in Yemen escalated attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea throughout 2024 and 2025, it was Chinese naval vessels operating from Djibouti that provided provided the most consistent maritime security patrols. When piracy threats emerged off the Somali coast, Chinese anti-piracy task forces, resupplied in Djibouti, maintained the longest continuous presence. The United States responded by increasing diplomatic pressure on Djibouti to limit Chinese access. According to leaked diplomatic cables reported by the Washington Post, the Biden administration offered Djibouti over $200 million in additional military aid in exchange for restricting Chinese base expansion. Djibouti accepted the aid and ignored the restriction request. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States offers financial incentives and a regional partner accepts the money but rejects the conditions, that is not ambiguity. That is not diplomatic nuance. That is a verdict on American leverage in 2026. If you operate a business with supply chains running through the Suez Canal, if you rely on energy imports from the Middle East, if you work in maritime insurance or international logistics, what is happening in Djibouti is not a foreign policy story. It is a cost structure story. It is a risk assessment story. It is a story about who controls the infrastructure that makes global trade possible. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. Think about the Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta, the two dominant powers of the ancient Greek world, went to war. The conflict lasted 27 years. Tens of thousands died. Cities were destroyed. Both sides exhausted their treasuries. And who won? Persia. Persia did not fight in the war. Persia funded both sides at different times, played them against each other, and emerged as the dominant power in the region when Athens and Sparta had destroyed each other's capacity to resist. The United States is Athens, pouring resources into containing China in the Pacific. China is Sparta, building infrastructure and economic leverage in regions America is too distracted to defend properly. And the Bab el-Mandeb is the Hellespont, the strategic choke point that will determine who controls trade routes for the next generation. The parallel is not perfect, but it is close enough to be instructive. What makes this moment different from previous great power competitions is speed. The British Empire took over a century to build its global network of naval bases and coaling stations. The United States took 50 years after World War II to establish its current network of overseas military installations. China has built a globally significant military presence in Djibouti in under a decade. They have done it through economic leverage rather than military conquest, through infrastructure investment rather than colonial occupation, and through strategic patience rather than aggressive expansion. So, where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths, because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, the United States dramatically increases military and economic engagement in Djibouti and East Africa, matching or exceeding Chinese investment, and successfully negotiates restrictions on Chinese military expansion in exchange for debt relief and infrastructure funding. This would require congressional approval for multi-billion-dollar spending in a region that has never been a political priority for American voters. It would require sustained commitment across multiple presidential administrations. It would require African governments to believe that American promises of long-term partnership are credible despite decades of inconsistent engagement. The probability of this path, in my assessment, is less than 20%. Path 2, China continues expanding its military infrastructure in Djibouti without meaningful American resistance. Within 5 years, China establishes a second African naval facility, most likely in Tanzania or Namibia. Chinese submarine patrols in the Indian Ocean become routine. American naval dominance in the region erodes gradually but irreversibly. This does not mean war. It means that in any future crisis involving Middle Eastern oil supplies, African resources, or Indian Ocean shipping lanes, China has credible power to shape outcomes in ways that serve Chinese interests rather than American preferences. The probability of this path is approximately 60%. Path 3, a crisis in the Taiwan Strait or South China Sea creates a confrontation that spills over into the Horn of Africa. The United States attempts to pressure Djibouti to close Chinese military facilities. Djibouti refuses. The United States considers military options to disrupt Chinese operations. Regional powers, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, refuse to support American military action and instead negotiate separately with China. American options become limited to ineffective sanctions that hurt African economies more than Chinese strategic interests. This path leads to accelerated decline in American influence across Africa and the Middle East. The probability of this path is approximately 20%. I think we are closer to path 2 than most analysts in Washington are willing to admit publicly. The infrastructure is already built. The debt relationships are already established. The political dependencies are already in place. Reversing this would require resources, attention, and political will that I do not see in the current American policy environment. But I could be wrong. What we do know is this: 6 months from now, you will be able to assess which path we are on by watching 3 indicators. First, watch Chinese submarine activity in the Indian Ocean. If patrols increase in frequency and duration, China is operationalizing the Djibouti facility beyond symbolic presence. Second, watch debt negotiations between China and Djibouti. If China forgives or restructures additional debt, they are deepening political leverage. Third, watch American military presence at Camp Lemonnier. If the United States reduces personnel or shifts resources to other regional locations, that is a strategic retreat, regardless of how it is described publicly. Here are the questions I want you to take away. How does American foreign policy adapt to a world where economic leverage matters more than military superiority? What happens to global trade when a single country controls multiple critical choke points? And most importantly, what does it mean for international order when the fastest growing military power in the world builds its strength not through conquest, but through infrastructure? Tell me in the comments what you think the United States should do in response to Chinese expansion in Djibouti. Tell me if you think American policymakers understand the significance of what is happening in the Horn of Africa. We will keep tracking every development in Djibouti, the Red Sea, and the broader Indian Ocean region. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand how global power is shifting in real time. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next analysis.